My name is Jim Collison, and live from Omaha, Nebraska, and the Gallup offices in India, as well as in Dubai tonight. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on May 23rd, 2016. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup independent experts and independent coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during our live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. Although many of you will watch this in the recorded version, if you'd like to get questions to us, if you have those, send them to us in an email, coaching@gallup.com. Or if you're on the live page right now, there's a contact form right there on the page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. For all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs, you can also catch the video now streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows, as well as the links to all our mobile apps. If you forget your top 5, it's great on our mobile apps. You can just look those up right there on your phone. Those are available for you on our coaches blog, just coaching.gallup.com. Pooja Luthra is our host today. She works as an advanced consultant with Gallup in our Delhi office. Pooja, it's always great to see you here. On a day, we've moved up the webcast from Tuesday to Monday. Welcome to another Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. Always nice to see you too. Welcome everyone to the Gallup India edition of Call to Coach. Our guest for today is Mick Todd, and he is the leader and founder of To Be Limitless. Mick has worked and coached with a vast array of individuals. He's based in Dubai at the moment, but he's worked with a vast array of individuals in local and global organizations, and his career spans the last 15 years as a coach. In fact, he was just mentioning he has over 15,000 hours of coaching, and the good part is that the creativity that Mick brings to the coaching that he does it's very interesting because he uses a lot of cutting-edge technology, including, of course, strengths-based coaching. He is a Gallup certified strengths coach, neuralistic programming, he's to emotional intelligence, and a host of other techniques that he deploys to create an impact, mostly in the domain of leadership for individuals that he coaches. Mick, it is so good to see you again. Very warm welcome
Pooja,
here.
Nice to see you as well. And to catch up and to be seeing you later in the week as well. I'm looking forward to the high performance team work that we'll be doing later in the week as well.
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. I didn't know I'll be seeing you there, but it'll be nice to catch up with you later this week as well. That'll be interesting, and a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out. I know you're a very, very busy person back there in Dubai with your work and everything. So let's just start by a little bit, Mick. I mean, it's been a while since you did your Gallup certification. You became a strength certified coach. Tell me a little bit about your top 5, and tell me about your journey since the certification ended.
Right. So my top 5 is includer, maximizer, belief, positivity, and woo. So I'm heavily geared towards the influence and relationship building. So I believe in relationship building as the cornerstone of what I do. In fact, my number 1 ritual, and I'll be talking about it later on, is the 1 call a day. So that's the call that you make, that you don't have to make, but you make to your clients, to people, just to touch base with people to see how they're traveling around their strengths and also around the goals that we've set. So I really believe in the strengths of relationship building, and the influencing strengths have been really key for me in building my business. So. But interestingly enough, probably the strength that I would focus on is the one that sits outside of those 2. The one that sits right in the middle of my top 5 is belief, and I think belief's a really important one for me, as you would understand. With maximizer, positivity, and woo in my top 5, there is a real possibility for things to go right off the edge of the scale without belief in there as a real ballast in my life. So I don't underestimate its importance either.
And that's, I'm glad you bring it up, and it's nice to speak with someone who has belief in their top 5, simply because we get so many questions asked on what is belief. Most people do believe in a few things. So then what is so different about belief? So before we get into your role as a coach, just how does belief resonate for you as a person?
Well, you know, and you talked about a lot of the tools that I use in terms of coaching. So from a values-based place, belief has a very important role to play, not just for me in keeping me away from the edges of woo and positivity, but also a very important part to play in core values and setting core values and staying aligned with your values. I feel like belief plays a critical role in that. So whenever I'm talking to individuals or organizations about values in particular, I use a question that actually catches people by surprise. And for people that know me, and you've met me before, Pooja, it's a question that shocks people because I ask people what they hate. Because I often find that's the best route to values, because if I ask you what your values are, I think people tend to stay on the surface. And there's a bit of cliche and there's a few just buzzwords that come out. But if I ask people, what do you hate? They tend to stop, think, I hate injustice. So I hate dishonesty. Then I flip it around and say, so you value honesty, you value justice, you value these things, and that really takes people to a different place. So I think belief is often core in the coaching journey, because it was interesting even last night with a client. Client works for a very large organisation here, just joined the C-suite of that organisation, and he spoke a lot about living a purposeful life. And I think if you don't understand and if you're not aligned with your values, it's very, very challenging to live a purposeful life. So we went through his values and discovered that, you know, for him it was the big part about justice and fairness was key for him, as he felt like he made this. He wasn't born with, as he said, a silver spoon in his mouth. So he's made this on his own. So he really values justice as well. So I'm not sure what his top 5 are. I just sent out his Strength Finder top 34 this morning. So I'll be interested to see where belief sits in his, actually.
Yeah. So clearly, you've actually just put me onto the next question that I was about to ask you about, how your talent themes play out in your style as a coach. And clearly, belief does play out, because when you're asking questions like, what is it that you hate? It's a filter that, of course, it's very close to your heart as well. So tell me a little bit about your journey as a coach. I know you've been doing it for a very long time, and I'm sure you were using other tools, etc. And now with the Strengths Finder in this whole repertoire, how has the coaching changed for you a little bit since then?
So my coaching journey started. I suppose it's always been ongoing, especially if you look at my strengths. But it started a long time ago. Strengths Finder was a big part of that. The second question that I ever asked to any of my clients is, tell me about you at your best. So, because that's all that I'm going to be fundamentally interested in. And interestingly enough, for me, the first question I ask myself each morning is, how am I going to leverage my strengths today? So for me, strengths are a critical element of being successful. So on my journey, as we've discussed, it's over 15,000 hours, creeping up towards 16,000 hours now of coaching. I work with a lot of the biggest organisations in the world and a lot of great people all over the world. I was in Australia last week with James Wyndham and his team at the Wolgan Valley One and Only, which is Australia's #1 luxury hotel. And they just started a strength journey down there, going through Strength Finder as well. So it's a core part of all of my individual coaching and all of my corporate coaching as well. So I've done it with the Sheraton, with Emirates Airlines, with DLA Piper, the world's largest corporate law firm, Edelman Darbo, House of Comms. There's a number of organisations where we're looking at strengths. So I love the way it plays out both individually and as a team as well. So seeing people understand their team a lot more and looking to bring the best out of people. We all know about the needle of that, and it's not really moving much about people focusing on strengths. We know that it's still, there's a real want to address people's weaknesses, but I find that the organisations that I'm working in and with around strengths, it's such a positive impact on people, even down to their language. I was at a networking event last week, and won't be surprised to know that there were about 10 guys with woo in their top 5 there, and they were, and the language around it, especially my clients meeting one another saying, I've got woo in my top 5. Oh yeah, I've got woo as well, and listening to people, listening to the way that even the language plays out. And I love to see when that awareness element rises, so that people are thinking about and focusing on their strengths all the time. And I see it have such a powerful impact on the way that people act and the impact that they have.
Oh, excellent. But tell me a little bit more. So you've said you worked with both individuals and you worked with teams inside all of these companies. So any particular case studies, any particular interactions that you remember vividly having made that sort of an impact because of the way they saw their talents play out, or the way you were able to sort of make that impact between the name it and the claim it?
Fantastic. So I work with I work with a very large oil and gas organisation here. I work with a client in that oil and gas organisation, and he had discipline and focus in his top 5, but he was so far from that it wasn't funny. So we spent a lot of time building awareness around that and setting up some rituals and setting some really key goals. And we've done that work over 18 months together. And now, from being in the basement or on the edge of the of discipline and focus, he's now made that cornerstone of his life. And remarkably, this guy's lost 52 kilos in that 18-month period, with no surgery, nothing but a sense of discipline and focus playing out. So that's been massive. That's had a massive impact. The other one I think that really resonates with me is probably a client that I've worked with for a very long time, and when he first came to me, he obviously had massive strengths in the area of relationship building and the area of influence, but he just wasn't leveraging them. So to get into the space where he was able to pull himself out of his day-to-day and go and leverage those relationship building skills and influencing skills, he had a goal to sell his business, but he was so in the business and not out developing relationships that goal wasn't moving. So we managed to flip the blueprint of his life around, and so he is woo number 1 and positivity number 2. So he's potentially one of the most dangerous men in the world. But he went out and he managed to build relationships, and he now, when he rings me, he'll say, I just wanted to let you know I'm not in the office, I'm out building relationships. These great things are happening. And as I keep on saying to me, I know that you ring me to tell me this, but there's no surprise for me. And so he's managed now to sell his business for 3 times what he assumed would be the asking price. And that was done on the back of relationships and on the back of his enormous ability to leverage his strengths. Now, he's got some other issues, as you would imagine, with woo and positivity. He is close to the world's worst timekeeper, and he's constantly running out of our coaching session going, oh my God, I'm 30 minutes late. But the massive thing for him is if he's in the office, he's not creating value. And I'm just focused on him leveraging his strengths and creating as much value as he can. And if he's in the office writing emails, responding to emails, it's just not him at his best. It has to be done, but I'm always looking for different ways for him to get to those things. And so strengths play out massively in the way that I interact with my clients, but they also have, a massive and enduring impact. So his final settlement comes out in the next few weeks, and that's been a fantastic strength-based journey for me to see how he has leveraged those strengths so well. Or the last one that I would probably mention is a client that I love working with. He's a lawyer. His balance was all over the place. He has futuristic and strategic are the two most pivotal strengths for him. He's also lost 23 kilos, got so much more present in his life. He's taken his team on the strength-based journey as well. They are in a really challenging market. They've absolutely smashed their revenue target, and they've been recognised by Chambers as a practice of excellence. He's just on a great journey and it's a strength-based journey. His language is about strength. Again, he talks to his team about strengths, so he's focused on their strengths. And in a market that's challenging, they're exceeding everybody's expectations. So it's great to see strengths play out in so many different ways. And it's also fantastic of those three people that I've spoken about, they're different strengths, so discipline and focus and woo and positivity and strategic and futuristic. They're leveraged in so many different ways, but the outcomes are fantastic for these guys as well.
Yeah, great examples, all of them. Mick, I have a curious question for you. So the one word I think I've heard you say a few times now, and even I read it in your bio, was something about rituals. So when you say rituals, it's about, I'm gathering it's about the intentionality of using your strengths in different ways. Tell me a little bit more about that. Is that something you do for yourself? Is that something you encourage as an outcome in your coaching conversations, to develop those rituals, those habits?
It's central to my success focus. So we spoke about at the start, I'm really focused on leadership and success. Now, success is a really broad area, obviously, because it looks like different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
But for me, rituals, and I love and hate language in equal measures. So I love it when it provides real clarity for people. I hate it when it's just a soundbite or a snapshot. So for me, I'm always defining words for my clients so that there's real clarity in my language around it. And so for me, rituals are the things that you do consistently in order to be successful. So I'm always looking at the things that people do consistently. So, and I try and center on those 4 or 5 key things that build success for people. So for me, for example, my success rituals are my morning routine. I get up at 4:45 every morning, every work morning, that is. Exercise is critical for me. So my Sunday morning ritual with Melanie, my personal assistant, my office manager, it's a critical element in that because it just lets me set up and be successful for the week ahead. So those elements, those are the things that I talk about with rituals. I think they're really important, and all of those key elements are the first things that go in, and they are a strength-based approach because it lets me focus on me at my best. I'm constantly looking for ways to maximize myself at my best, and anything that I'm doing or that doesn't let me leverage that, I'm always looking to either eliminate or delegate as well. So, and I'm really fortunate because I have outstanding support both from Melanie and Mohammed, who are in the background key for me, as well as the rest of my team as well.
That's probably, when you start talking rituals, that's probably the biggest value that a coach can bring to a coaching relationship. And we've spoken about this, that if someone was to read their report, and Strengths Finder pretty much leads in that people read the report and say, oh, that's me. And simply because, it's a test that basically reflects who you are. So that's not so much the value. If the coach is able to define certain actions and techniques and rituals, like you said, that can be done because of the strengths I have, that's probably the biggest value that a coach would bring.
And
so it's great to, yeah.
I agree with that, Pooja, and I'm always saying to people that the value of the coaching session, there's no value in the coaching session. The actual session itself has no value. The value is in the space between the sessions. What are you actually out and doing in between the sessions? So we talked about definitions before. Another one that's massive for me is optimism, and I define optimism as consistent, considered, decisive, positive action. I love positivity. It's one of my top 5 strengths. So I love it as a strength. But it's nothing without optimism. It's nothing without the action. So I'm constantly looking to get my clients to take action around their strengths, because, as we say, Strength Finder doesn't tell you your strengths. It tells you your talents. They're only your strengths if you're leveraging them. And the leverage part is the action. You must take action. And that's why I love optimism as well, because I talk about it being consistent and considered. And the rituals are the part that make it consistent. And so ritualizing around those strengths is really important.
Yeah, great. Just curious about another thing, based on what I've read in terms of your coaching experience. You have pretty much worked across the globe. I mean, I see Australia, Ireland, England, Europe, Southeast Asia, US, Middle East, everywhere. So when you start looking at people from all these different nationalities and start coaching them basis the strengths-based development, are there any aspects of culture that come out to you a lot more? When you're coaching people from different backgrounds and nationalities?
There's a couple of things. I think, and you talked about it, and I love that you use the language, I'm curious. So being curious is a key part for me in any coach's vocabulary. I think there's certain cultures that are more individualistic, and there's certain cultures that are more collective in their thought process. So I think that those things do play out a little bit, but I tend just to try and be as curious as possible. And for me, the big part is being prepared and asking great questions, because the questions are the part that brings out what people want to focus on. Because it's not my role even to be even that concerned about what people's outcomes are. My role really is to help people find a pathway to their outcomes. So I'm trying to be as curious as I can be, and I'm always looking to ask great questions. And there are obviously clients in Saudi, clients in New York, different clients all over the world. There are different environmental factors, different cultural factors, different even family factors that come into play. So what you have to always be is the greatest enemy of the coach is assumption, of course. So I never assume that I know, based even on a profile, who a person is or they're trying to achieve. So constantly being curious, asking great questions, and you know, you do see certain reoccurring patterns in coaching, especially when you've had such a body of work as mine. But even those reoccurring patterns are different for each individual. So because it means one thing to one client doesn't mean it means exactly the same thing to others. So it is, but it is always important, I think, and especially at the moment. We know some of the challenges that we face around the world at the moment. And that's why I love strengths as well, because it celebrates the differences in people rather than wanting to homogenize the world. And I love that your top 5 in the order that you have them in, 1 in 33 million people have them. I love that, because it doesn't look to homogenize you. It looks to say, you're special, you're unique. How can we leverage that so you can make your unique impact on the world? And that's the other part I love about the strengths-based journey is we're not saying everybody needs to be the same. And if you're not the same, then you can't be successful. That you know, as I've already alluded to this morning, the 3 clients I mentioned have vastly different strengths, but they're on massive success journeys. So I love that. I do love that.
Yeah, and that's the empowering thought behind the idea of strengths-based development, right? That you can be, you just have to be the best of who you already are, as opposed to, you know, the role model type of scenario. This is who you'd like to be. Again, a quick question around, you know, you've been doing this for a very long time, and just to, you know, pick your brain on, we get this asked a lot by coaches who are starting off or consultants who are starting off. What have your biggest barriers been in terms of helping people accept the idea of strengths-based development? I'm talking about as a philosophy, not talking about the instrument, not talking about Gallup in particular, but just about the strengths-based philosophy. I mean, have you had any particular barriers that you typically come across?
Actually, sincerely, I've got to say, there's no barriers that really have stood out to me. What I would say is that the illumination for people, because so many people out there are thinking about what they're bad at and how can I fix it. You know, so the number of people that say to me when I say, tell me about you at your best, and they say to me, I don't understand the question. I say, really? So you're not spending too much time thinking about you at your best? No, Mick, I'm here so that you can fix me. I don't think you're broken. So why would I try and fix you? I think you're unique, and I think we're going to be focusing on you at your best and how can we leverage that more often, because that's what great life looks like. So for me, probably the only barrier is that there is a mindset still out there, and we're well aware of it. Gallup will, I'm sure that we can share statistics around it. It will be able to tell you that so many people think about their weaknesses and how we can fix them. But I think the encouraging thing for us as strength-based coaches is when you can illuminate in people's minds their strengths and get them to go and put them to work, the power for transformation is enormous. And when you have organizations and individuals thinking about their strengths and really looking to leverage them, wow, it is exciting stuff. And so I think one of the areas that if you are having challenges getting people to see that, I think it comes back to really making sure that you're focused on asking great questions, not trying to tell people. I don't try and tell or sell strengths. I just ask great questions. So that for me is a massive part of it.
Yeah, no, I understand. When we hear it a lot. In fact, we actually laugh sometimes about it. That probably our biggest job is to defy gravity, because automatically people are looking to look at what's wrong with me and how can I fix it. So if you can defy the gravity, is when people are able to see the value of concentrating on what they're naturally good at.
But
So
I think that's where your preparation comes into play. So when you can quote to people who focus on their strengths are 3 times more likely to report a high quality of life and 6 times more likely to be engaged at work.
To be engaged.
Yeah, yeah. So, and when I talk about engagement, I talk about head, knowing, heart, feeling, hands, doing, and legacy. It's bigger than me. So whenever I'm talking to people about engagement, I'm talking about those 4 key things. And when you talk about being 6 times more likely to be in that space, and so I think you, as a coach as well, a key success for me is being prepared. And to understand and to be able to move past the objections. The objection, and I'm not talking in a cynical way, moving past the as a selling technique, but as in a way that people can move past their objections that will stop them from getting to the best version of themselves.
It's a bit like the name it, claim it, what we spoke about, right? I mean, naming is easy because you're able to read the reports. It's simple English. But the claiming it part comes only when you're able to see how it has helped you, and that's just the objections they're talking about. They're not really sure how does it merge with their context.
And I'm sure for all the coaches out there, Pooja, that one of the most common pieces of language that you will hear in your sessions, and so I'm happy to share a tool that I use around this as well, is Mick, I know. Fantastic. So the name it and claim it part for me is when people say they know, that's terrific, but it has no impact on me. I talk about wisdom being knowledge applied, so that, okay, you know it, what are we going to do with that knowledge so it becomes wisdom? And so constantly being able to give people language and define language for people so that they can create triggers around things. So when I say I know, that has no impact. But when I'm wise, that's around the actions I've taken to leverage those strengths. So those are important things for me as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. So now before we get into the chat room and all of that, I just had one more question. Since you have done a lot of work, you said, with individuals as well as teams. So how different is the role of a coach when you're coaching an individual versus doing something for a team together?
Obviously, the individual piece is a lot more intimate. It's not that different, actually, in many ways. The strength grid is a great tool for that, and helping people understand, that's the reason that happens, and helping people understand what are the people's basements and balconies, and obviously the trick is, as always, is to say, right, remember, this is strength finder, not weakness eliminator. The basements aren't the focus. They're just they're pieces to be aware of. Where the balcony is where we're focused. And for other people out there, you might know those two as the power and the edge. We talk about power and the edge, or the balcony and the basement, and getting people onto the balcony, but also giving them awareness of the basement, and then giving them tools as well when they recognize that they're in the basement, to make sure that they can get back to the balcony, where, of course, their strengths are going to play out much more powerfully.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jim, any questions from the chat room?
No, it's been we moved the night up, so it's been a little quiet out there in the chat room. But Mick, you had said, let me ask this, you had mentioned twice, when we disconnected a second ago, I mentioned this to Pooja, but twice you've mentioned you've worked with folks around using their top 5 in a fitness or in a health, of losing some weight. You mentioned that in 2 specific instances. Has that become something recently? Because we don't often equate that to this idea, or when we're talking about rituals of health goals. Are you getting some questions from clients about how to take their themes and turn those into healthy actions, healthy habits, healthy rituals, kind of based on their themes?
Not specifically, Jim. Actually, I just think what actually happens and how it plays out, mate, is that because I'm a life is one thing guy. I don't see life as separate. I see it has a very clear starting point and a very clear ending point, and everything in between is life. So I think I try and get people to play strengths out over all of their life. This is not just you at your best when you're at your workstation. This is you at your best when you're at home. This is you at your best when you're interacting with your friends in a social manner. This is you at your best when you're setting fitness and health goals. So I see life as one thing. So I think what has happened through that is I've not tried to get these people to isolate strengths as just a work thing, that when I leave the door and pick up my hat, I leave my strengths at work and I'll come and pick them up tomorrow. I don't think that's the way it works.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, in that sometimes we focus this as just a business tool too. That, I'm going to bring these themes to work and I'm going to make my job better, when we have opportunities in parenting, when we have opportunities with relationships, when we have opportunities with our own health and some of the things we do, right? That all blends in. But what you're saying is a holistic approach.
Well, your life's one thing. And Mahatma Gandhi once famously said, life is indivisible. You shouldn't try and cut it up. You shouldn't try and put it into parts. And that theory of flow, and the more you can get into and I think strengths play out really, really strongly around flow. The more you can get into the flow of your life, the more likely you are to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up flow. We were just talking about that. We had Theme Thursday Focus last week, and that came up of when you're in oftentimes we associate that theme of focus as being the one that drops into flow the quickest, but we know those are consistent across all 34 themes. It's not just focus that can get you into flow, right?
Like for me, woo is massive for flow for me. When I'm in that moment with people, and one of the tools that I'm really into is, get a theme day where you just go and primarily focus on one of your strengths. So if I know that I've got a networking or a team event or I'm doing a training, I'm massively focused on woo that day. And you get to the end of the day and say, wow, wasn't that a great day? And that's you at your strongest again, isn't it? That, any of those days where you're getting to the end of it saying, wow, wasn't that fantastic? That's really you at your strongest, and that's you leveraging your strengths. So I understand why people would say that positivity is massive for me around getting into flow as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of examples of strengths that get you there.
Mick, we do have a question from the chat room. They're asking, how would I go about defining my rituals? About how many hours should I ideally dedicate per day to build on my top 5 themes?
Once again, I think it's about understanding you at your best. And I don't think it's about time. I think it's about quality. I think it's about making sure that you don't try and chop it up. I'd like to see people have their rituals as the basis of their day, and that we're trying to create that flow of our, as we've just been discussing, the flow of our strengths through our day. Typically, though, I think if we're going to talk about cornerstone rituals, for me, statistically, the morning is our most powerful time. So I think if you can carve out some time, an hour in the morning to have a strength-based ritual there. That's at least a good starting point. But looking to try and create the flow and the impact of your strengths throughout the day is important. So I think you position key rituals around your day, and we all know the power and the importance of reflection. So the journaling at the end of the day around your strengths is another great ritual for that as well. So where you can get down and say, right, how did I leverage my strengths today? And the power of writing it down and then giving yourself a focus for tomorrow, I think, is really important as well.
And a follow-up question to that from the chat room, some tricks on keeping that consistent. How do we keep those rituals consistent once we get them going?
And that's such a critical element. So it's building in and building on strengths. But as I say to my clients, the master gift is consistency. I love that statistic that Warren Buffett earned 98% of his immense wealth after the age of 50 because of the compound nature of interest. And your rituals are the same. If you want to get compound benefit out of them, they have to be consistent. So it's also building in it's building in space to your schedule so that that you're not creating this immense amount of pressure. And it's also, I think, Jim, focusing on excellence rather than perfection. I'm always focused on excellence, and universities around the world will give you a high distinction for basically 85% and above. So if you can get to your rituals 85% of the time, 80 to 85% of the time, that gives you a little bit of leeway and an opportunity to build, but that has to be consistency over time. And it doesn't mean pulling up 15% short. It means getting there, turning up, and even if it's not working for you to start with, keep on turning up, because over time, that Jim Collins idea of thin layers just on top of one another over time, that's where your compound interest comes from.
Yeah.
So I see the consistency of rituals being really important. Build a great preparation ritual. Planning is critical to making sure you're as consistent as possible, and scheduling your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule. Making sure that the first thing that goes into your timetable each week are your priorities, not just the things that you're scheduled to do. So the first thing that I put in my schedule each week are my success rituals.
Yeah, you make a great point in that, as a social media coordinator for Gallup, I keep track of all the conversations that go on all around the world in all different time zones on all the different social media platforms. And it could be a little overwhelming if that's something I tried to sit down and do over one period of time. Like, okay, today it's Monday, I'm going to get this done. I have to slice that up across the week, and oftentimes I spend the first part of my morning kind of going through it and prioritizing and planning it, and then I spend the other parts of the day, like in the margins, like in the scraps of time that I have in between meetings and such, hitting those, and I can get a lot done. This is, people always ask me all the time, Jim, how are you out there all the time? And I'm not all the time. I'm just out there enough a little bit of the time that it looks like I'm there, right? And so I can cover these conversations over different time zones. And here I'm actually doing a little social media while we're on the interview, and we're doing some things because it's in the moment, right? And so there's some great opportunities to spread that. Sometimes spread that across your day instead of feeling the pressure to be overwhelmed by it all at once.
Yeah, and so I'm a maximizer as well, Jim. So maximizing all of those little windows. So I've got a driver, and that's such an important part of, that's an important success ritual for me, and that's not a cost. I don't view that as a cost thing. I view that as a value thing. So once I jump in the car, I'll get onto the hotspot and I'll make sure I clear all my emails. I'll Twitter post the client that I've just been at, and it's having a look at your schedule and of course, excellence is about doing the wow things really well, but also the little things that are the simple joins in being successful, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And you know, and thanks to you as well, because I've seen on some of my posts, you've even liked or retweeted as well from all the way from Dubai. So I know that you're in those little moments, capturing the strength-based conversations all over the world.
Well, sometimes it's consistency in the moment and not necessarily being available and open and watching for what's going on and it's the little things that matter oftentimes in our coaching or in some of the things that we're doing where you're available in the moment and you can turn those pieces around back to that person or a coaching moment or watching something that's going on in your team that I think make a big difference. And so it's you know, the ritual for me, it's the ritual of being available. Right?
Yeah, and I love that, Jim, because the number one thing I spoke to my team about this year is be present. And so we've defined being present as what if every person you came into contact with today was a better version of themselves because they were in contact with you. So the more present you can be in your moment, and that's, of course, important message for business leaders about family, because I'm sure a lot of coaches out there, you know, a couple of the common themes we get hit with, isn't it? Balance. How do I create greater balance in my life? And so that's not a quantity thing. You know, they're not making any more time. You know, there's 24 hours again tomorrow. It's an ironclad guarantee. So it's not about more time. It's about your impact and quality in the time. So that's what rituals I'm focused on with my clients is how do I improve the quality of your time? And when it comes to balance, once again, we define balance as not a little bit of everything, but making sure that you make an impact on your priorities. Because the only time that you feel out of balance is typically when you're not making impact on your priorities. You know, and isn't priority an interesting word? Up until the 20th century, it only existed in singular form. It's only in the 20th century that we started to develop the idea of priorities. So it's really important that we consistently try. I'm always challenging my clients who say, I've got too many priorities. My first response is, you don't understand the word then. You've got to get back to the most important things.
And Mick, doesn't that come back to what we originally started with the idea of values? So we set those priorities based on the values that we have. By the way, great. I love the way of coming at those values from what are you strongly, what are you struggling with, or what do you hate? And then that kind of defines the positive value on the other side. So there's some great tips there.
I found that really powerful. I find that really powerful in organizations, Jim, to be honest.
Yeah.
When you're in an organization, because otherwise it can tend to get a little bit shallow and cliched in people's response. But once you say, what do you hate? People sort of sit up in their chair and, whoa, and they'll think about it and they'll throw out a couple of things. And then when they see me then write up, I'll take all the list and then I'll start writing them up and say, so this is what you guys truly value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a great tip. I'm going to use that. I will use that again. I think a great tip of how to get to it, because sometimes we ask too easy questions, right? It's too easy for them just to say yes.
Surface.
Yeah, and then you can't dig in, right?
Yeah. And I love that. I love that language as well, Jim, because I'm constantly saying to people, I'm focused on simple, not easy. So for me, easy is many, many things touched, but none done well and not with no depth. Whereas simplicity is the priorities with great depth. So asking simple questions rather than easy questions. So questions that really hone in on the most important things and then really go deep into those things. Because simple life is a lot better than easy life.
Yeah. Well, good. Pooja, do we have you back? We lost you there for just a second. Are you back with us? Okay,
Yes, I
good.
am.
Well, I think we're just wrapping up on time here. Anything you want to close
Fantastic.
with, Pooja, as we go?
Nothing that I can think of. I think it's been such a great discussion, Megan. I'm actually looking forward to continuing this with you when we meet later this week. So it'll be nice to catch up on some of this in more detail. But great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out.
A pleasure.
And
A real pleasure.
great.
Well, Mick,
That's all that I have, Jim.
Mick, I will look forward to seeing you hopefully here this summer at the Gallup Strengths Summit.
Fingers crossed, Jim. I really would like to get across there. Obviously, depends on priorities again, I suppose.
No, absolutely.
Totally. And balancing family priorities. But I look forward to catching up again. Thanks for your great support of everybody out there who's focused on strength. So really appreciate the opportunity also to talk to both live and hopefully in a recorded version to coaches out there as well. And I look forward to more questions to answer as well. So
yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on here. Again, the Clifton Strengths Summit's coming up here July 18th, 19th, and 20th here in Omaha, Nebraska, and we will look forward to having hundreds, maybe thousands of strengths enthusiasts from all around the world there as well. And I'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. If you have questions or comments, anything that we didn't answer here today, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as about 150 others that we have available for you now out at our coaches blog. Just go to coaching.gallup.com. If you found this useful, and I think this one you will, you might want to share it with others. It'd be a great way to get that out. Just grab the link, share it with your network, and we want to thank you for joining us today. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.